Watch his face. He's just got kicked on purpose in a World Cup knockout match with the whole tournament watching, and he's laughing. That's not a laugh that's trying to prove anything. If I had to guess what it's saying, it's something like, nice try, I've seen that trick before and it's a little silly. I could get rattled by it. But when you've got the quality I've got, you don't need to. Here's the thing, he's the same guy people call arrogant, overconfident, grumpy, hard to like. And today, doing basically nothing except being exactly himself, he got praised for it. Same guy, same unfiltered reaction, and two completely different verdicts from the public. He's Kylian Mbappé. And here's a pattern I keep noticing elsewhere, completely separate from him. French people, as a group, get hit with the same arrogant label. Rude, unwelcoming, hard to warm up to by the rest of the world. I'm trying to walk through this using one of the most famous French novels ever written, L'étranger. That gap between what someone actually does and how differently we judge it, depending on our mood, is what this video is about. Stick with me, all of this is going to connect. If you're new here, welcome to Rachel Mehajan en Français. Glad to have you here, and it's been a while. This is a space for people who love French culture and French language learning. Seeing French culture as an outsider always gives me a special angle. I love relating things to philosophy and spirituality, so I try to make sense of everything through that lens. I personally speak 4 native languages because of my background growing up, and I've been learning French for years now, purely for the pleasure of it, not for any test or job. If you're a Francophile and any of that resonates with you, you're going to feel very at home here. Please subscribe to my channel right now and I'll be so grateful for your supports. And today, if you're also a football mad, you're going to resonate even more than usual because this one is a little different from me. I should be upfront, I don't play football, never have. But I've been watching the World Cup since I was 10 years old, sitting next to my dad, and I still remember exactly which match hooked me. It was France versus Brazil. That's the one that did it. These days, my husband and my son, who are the real football mads in the house, which means I'm never more than one dinner conversation away from every trend, every match, every hot topic going on in the football right now. And the team France, obviously I will watch France playing anyone, anytime if I can. Which brings me to Mbappé specifically. I've known who he is since his PSG days, Paris Saint-Germain, and honestly, I've never had a strong feeling about him either way. No dislike, no particular fan energy, just, oh, that's one of the best footballer alive right now, which is actually exactly why I think I'm in a decent position to talk about the way people feel about him, because I came into this with no side already picked. I'm not here to tell you he's a saint, and I'm not here to tell you you're wrong for not liking him. I'm not picking a side here. I just want to show you why the dislike exists and where it actually comes from, because I don't think most people have looked past the surface of it. Alright, now let's get into it. The word that comes up most is arrogant. He carries himself with a level of confidence that if you don't know him personally and only see him in interviews or in celebrations moments, can read as full of himself. His playing style doesn't help this case either. He's a player who takes risks, goes for the spectacular option, plays in a way some critics call flashy rather than efficient. Adding that he's active and visible on social media, constantly seen, constantly commented on, and you've got a public figure who never gets to disappear between headlines. And it's not just casual fans, even his own teammates have had to publicly defend him. Earlier this year, Ousmane Dembélé, his own strike pilot for France, said the criticism directed at Mbappé has gone too far. His actual quote, paraphrased, people are going after him for things as small as whether he ties his shoelaces properly. That's not a football critic. That's scrutiny of a person's manner, how he holds himself dressed up as a critic of his game. So here's the pattern already starting to show. The criticism aren't really about decisions he's made on the pitch. It's about how he carries the confidence he has. And that distinction between what someone does and how they are perceived for simply being themselves while doing it is going to matter a lot in about 10 minutes. So let's go back to that Paraguay match. Paraguay came into that round of 16 match playing physical, targeting him specifically. The reasonable read is they Mbappe wanted to provoke him, get him rattled, take him out of his rhythm mentally before the game even got going. Remember that laugh I showed you at the start of the video? The nice try, I've seen that trick before laugh? That's the moment I'm talking about it. He didn't complain to the referee, he didn't perform anger, and he didn't perform victimhood either. He just found the whole thing a little bit funny, visibly, repeatedly, for the rest of the match. And here's where I think the media actually shapes a lot of this more than we realize. We don't experience these moments raw. We experience them through whatever a commentator says over the replay, whatever headlines get written an hour later, and whatever clip an interviewer chooses to air. Former Real Madrid player Ravel van der Vaart put it well when he pushed back on the arrogance label. His point, paraphrased, was that the arrogant hack is wide of the mark, and Mbappe just gets blamed by default because he's the one carrying the team's biggest expectations. So two different men, two different contexts, both saying the same thing. This isn't really about the football. Now, here's my question. What actually changed between the arrogant Mbappe and marble, composed, mature Mbappe in that Paraguay match? Nothing changed about him. What changed is which unwritten rule he happened to be breaking, and how the media chose to frame it in that moment. Society doesn't actually mind confidence. What it wants is confidence wrapped in humility. The I'm just doing my job performance that makes self-belief feel safe to be around. Mbappe skips that wrapping, and normally commentators fill that gap with words like arrogant. But in that Paraguay match, the exact same unwrapped reaction, laughing instead of performing outrage, got framed by commentators as grace under pressure instead. The trait didn't change, the narrative around it did. Same traits, same lack of performance, two completely different verdicts, and the media apparatus deciding in real time which verdicts the public would hear. That's not a story about Mbappe having two sides, that's a story about the public fed by the media framing having two moods and reading both of them onto the same completely consistent person. To be clear, I'm not saying Mbappe speaks for an entire country. He's one guy, and this isn't about him representing France, but there is a pattern I keep noticing completely separated from him, and I think it's worth putting side by side with everything we just talked about. Mbappe gets disliked for the same basic things over and over. Being himself without rapping in the humility everyone else has agreed to perform. Confidence without pretending otherwise. The red without softening it for the room. And somewhere along the way, that unwrapping version of a person stopped being read as honest and started being read as arrogant. I've lived this exact conversation myself actually, just about an entire country instead of one person. I can't tell you how many times someone asked me why I love French culture so much, and then immediately follow it with some version of I went to France once and everyone was so rude to me, and every single time I feel like I have to defend it, explain that the France you meet as a tourist for 1 week isn't the France you meet once you actually live there. Learning the language, get to know the people underneath. Once you're inside it, what gets called rude starts looking like something else entirely. The freedom to just say what you think, be who you are, without performing warmth you don't feel for a stranger who is passing through. That's exactly the thing I admire most about French culture. Not despite the bluntness, but because of it. Sound familiar, huh? That's the same mechanism. Just scale up from one man to an entire nationality. Confidence without the humility wrapper gets called arrogant. Directness without the hospitality wrapper gets called rude. In both cases, nothing about the person or the people actually changed. What changed is that they didn't perform the emotional labor everyone else quietly agreed to expect. Which brings me to a 1942 novel that already figured this out. Quick note before I go further, I'm about to talk through the plot of this book, including the ending. So if L'étranger is on your list and you haven't read it yet, this is your spoiler warning. The book is really short and you can read it in an afternoon. If you want to grab a copy, I've linked it below. That's an affiliate link, so a small percentage supports the channel at no extra cost for you. For everyone else, let's keep going. In 1942, Albert Camus published a short novel called L'étranger, The Strangers, or sometimes translated as The Outsider. It opens with one of the most famous first lines in French literature. The narrator, Musso, learns his mother has has died, and he can't quite locate the appropriate grief inside himself. He attends the funeral. He doesn't cry. A day or two later, he goes to see a comedy film with the woman he is interested in. He lives his life exactly as he feels it, without performing anything he doesn't feel. Later in the book, Murso kills a man, almost by accident, in a moment of heat and confusion on a beach. He's put on trial for murder, and here's the part that should sound familiar by now. What the prosecution really goes after is his behavior at his mother's funeral. The fact that he didn't cry, the fact that he went to a comedy the next day. They build a case not around what he did, but around the fact that he didn't perform the emotions society expected of him. So Camus wrote his own explanation of the book years later, and the core of it is something like this. Murso isn't condemned because he's a bad person or because he lacks feeling. He's condemned because he refuses to play society's game, the unwritten rules about which emotions you are required to display, and when, regardless of what you actually feel inside. He tells the truth about his inner life instead of performing the expected version of it. And society cannot forgive that. Camus even calls him, in essence, the only Christ figure his time deserves. A man who dies for refusing to lie about how he feels. I remember being genuinely shocked the first time I read this book. My Chinese translated copy actually had a line printed right on the cover. In Cantonese it said, 你憑咩審判我嘅靈魂? In English it means, what rights does anyone have to judge another person's soul? This line totally stuck with me. That's exactly what's happening every time Mbappé gets called arrogant for confidence that doesn't come wrapped in humility. It's exactly what's happening every time an entire country gets called rude for simply not putting on the warmth visitor expected. Nobody actually has the right to judge someone's soul just because it didn't come wrapped the way we were expecting. And here's where it clicks for me. Mbappé isn't on trial for murder, obviously. Nobody's saying this is that serious, but structurally, the mechanism is identical. He's not disliked for his football. He's disliked for refusing to perform the version of confidence the society finds palatable. The falsely humble, self-deprecating, like those "Oh, I just love the game" version athletes are expected to perform in every interview whether they feel it or not. Mbappé doesn't do that, and he doesn't downplay his ability to make people comfortable. He celebrates like he means it, and when he gets fouled by a team trying to provoke him, he doesn't perform outrage. He just laughs, and whatever is actually going on in his head, he clearly doesn't feel the need to perform anything else for the cameras. That's the inner child I keep coming back to when I think about him. Not in a therapy speak, wounded inner child kind of way, but literally a child hasn't learned yet which emotions are socially acceptable to show, which one needs to be hidden or edited for an audience. Kids feel something and it just comes out on their face. Somewhere between childhood and adulthood, most of us learn to intercept that, to check our expression against what the room expects before we let it show. Mbappé, for whatever reason, seems to have kept less of that filter than most public figures his level of famous, and the world doesn't know what to do with that. It either loves it or punishes it, almost at random depending on the day. Murso in the book got sentenced to death for it in fiction in 1942. Mbappé gets called arrogant by millions of haters in real life. Well, I don't want to wrap this up too neatly because I don't think it resolved neatly. There is a real cost to being the person who won't perform. Murso pays for it with his life, and Mbappé pays for it in a slower way, in headlines, in whistles from stadiums that aren't even his home crowd, in the accumulated weight of being cast as difficult by people who've never spoken to him, based on nothing but the fact that his face didn't do what they expected it to do in a given moment. And maybe that's worth sitting with for a second before you close this tab, because most of us do the opposite of what Murso and, in his own smaller way, Mbappé do. We perform. We check our face against the room before we let anything show. We say we're fine when we're not and pretend not to care when we do, because somewhere somewhere along the way we learned that the unfiltered version of us is a liability. I'm not telling you that's wrong. Society mostly requires it to function, but it's worth asking what it costs you personally to keep doing it. And it's worth noticing that the thing we call arrogance in someone else is very often just someone who stopped paying that particular cost. And honestly, this isn't even the first time I've run into this exact confusion where someone's just being genuinely themselves and it gets read as arrogance instead. It happens to entire countries, not just footballers. French people get hit with the same label constantly: rude, arrogance, when a lot of the time it's the same story. Someone being direct, being honest about how they feel, and being punished for not softening it into something more palatable. You already know where I'm going to send you next, because we basically already talked about it. But first, if you want deeper dives like this one, delivered straight to your inbox before they even become a video, I've got a newsletter for that too. Links below, just more of what you are already here for. I actually went deep on that a while back, why the French get called rude and arrogant and what's really going on underneath that reputation. If this video got you thinking, that one's the natural next step. I'll drop it right here, go watch it next. See ya!